Welcome everyone to something we said, a celebration of just some of the fantastic Bloomsbury Children books publishing this year. My name is MC Grammar. I am your host for this evening. Thank you very much for joining us. We do apologize for any technical issues, but it's technology. We can never really rely on it. My name is MC Grammar. Let me tell you a little bit about myself before we get started with the event. I'm a teacher, a YouTuber, and I celebrate English, rapping, and books all through the power of music. And this year I was actually fortunate enough to write and record the first ever World Book Day song. So if you haven't heard it, check it out. It's a great celebration of books, authors, illustrators, and publishers from all over. So a big thank you to everyone that made that happen. Speaking of making things happen, it's fantastic to be here and start the event. We are speaking to a legend first of all this evening, but we're also going to hear from 9 brilliant authors, and I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing the first one, from comedian, actor, rapper, screenwriter Ben Bailey Smith. Comes the biggest middle grade debut this year, a blazingly funny, big-hearted story about family, friendship, and how far one boy will go to get a laugh. And trust me, I've read it, it's very, very funny. Please welcome Ben Bailey Smith, author of Something I Said, publishing in June. How you doing, Ben? You all right?
I'm good. Can everybody hear me? I hope so. I hate these things.
Yeah, it's difficult to gauge, isn't it? But it's great to have you here, man. Honestly, I wrapped this up last night. It was tight getting it done in time, but I'm telling you, man.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
What a great book! And I'm just want to hear your story about how you went from comedian, rapper as well. I'm big into the rap music as well. So, and then ended up with this beautiful thing right here. Tell us some more, man.
Congratulations on the song. I should say that before we continue. It's great. Yeah, it's kind of a organic journey, really. I didn't plan any of it, to be honest. My only plan when I was a little kid was, I think I was about 6 years old. I wanted to be an actor or a milkman, or one of those two, definitely. And I didn't achieve either of those until pretty late on in my life. I was 29 the first time I stepped on a stage and tried stand up, by which time I had 2 kids. I had over a decade of experience of youth work. You know, I was running my own youth service at that time, a charity for kids, and that was kind of my world, really. But I always had in the back of my head that I wanted to entertain people. So it's kind of interesting that I've come to this point here where I've got a book for children and young people, because that was my essence before I got into show business. And getting into show business via stand-up, as soon as I was doing stand-up comedy in 2008, I was also developing this idea for a children's TV show for CBBC. So that was all sort of built off of the inspiration of working with kids, you know. So the kids have always been in the back of my mind, and then as a parent in the forefront of my mind as well. So I've never really, although I've obviously been involved in all sorts of adult content. That sounds like a bit of a weird thing to say, but you know what I mean. Entertainment for adults. At the same time, I've always done little things for kids and wanted to do more, from CBBC through the work I've done for CBeebies, screenwriting and voicing cartoons and all sorts. It was the most natural thing in the world for me to have a go at writing picture books, but again, not something that I was really the driver of. All the agency was with my friend Sav, who was an illustrator. He had a character. He came to me and said, "You can write something for this character that I've drawn." So that was the birth of the picture books. And then obviously working with amazing publishers like Walker and of course Bloomsbury, there were a few publishers who were saying to me, like, how come you don't write for older kids, or like YA stuff, like middle grade, or, you know, longer form? And I thought, I never said this to anybody, but I thought, because I'm way too lazy for that. I'm never going to do that. That's going to take way too long. 32 pages with some pictures, that's fine.
Yeah, I get it.
But
The book does so much than just being a book. For me, like, there were so many nuggets in there that
yeah, that's what it's about.
Yeah, like honestly, my spirit umbrella was up today. I was out and I was like, right, yeah, some stuff happened, and I was like, right, the spirit umbrella's up right now. And even the last poignant lines from Missy as well, it's just a fantastic journey, and it does what books do naturally, which is to give you the power of words and take you somewhere else, and step into other characters. But also it celebrates language as well. The fact that etymology
Yeah.
is such a central core purpose in the book as well. It's a wonderful thing, man. So I think you put something that really special together. What about Carmichael? Tell us more about. Is there elements of Carmichael? Are you in Carmichael, or is Carmichael just Carmichael? Are we saying?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of me in him. I'm not as ballsy as him. He's very willing to take risks, and he's also very, in some ways, incredibly mature. Even though he's like emotionally, he's a little immature, but in terms of his intelligence, his academic intelligence, he's incredibly smart. So he's way smarter than I ever was. And the two things combined to make him, borderline arrogant in terms of like what he feels he can achieve and how important he feels his ideas are. And there was none of that in the 13-year-old me. But of course, like the experiences you had, in a way, there are lots of different experiences that I've had turned up to 11, whether that be his experience as a mixed race kid, his experience in entertaining people and feeling like the odd one out, or his love of language. All of those things I've got, but I just sort of made them all extreme and explicit for the young readers, but I'm so glad you said what you said about like the nuggets in there, because it really was from the start. I wanted to have little things in there that would empower kids without being lame, whether that's about words, whether that's about how you see your future. Because I know, like, from having teenagers myself, it's hard to look at a future that isn't bleak for teenagers, so it's like tying in like your loves, your inspirations, and how they can push you to achieve. And there's all this positivity in it that I just wanted to hide in there so that it wasn't preachy, worthy, or boring, and the key to that was just being funny on as many pages as possible.
Yeah, I think you've done that, man. It's so well interweaved. I mean, when I was reading it, it was almost as if I was reading almost like a personal development book or self-help book. Honestly, there's parts where I was just highlighting. I was like, "Do you know what? This is quite profound." And you can imagine, if you're picking up as a middle grader, they might not consciously be aware of these sort of nuggets. But actually, what you're
Exactly.
doing is you're just dropping them in there. It's real subtle, but actually it's good advice to become a good person. Carmichael's journey, like you say, is quite ballsy, but also, some people might think to myself, I'm not sure if that's cool, Carmichael, to do what you're doing. It's quite what he does to his family, for example. He's quite blind to understanding how actually that can be quite a negative thing. But in the end,
Absolutely.
the journey he evolves through, actually, his the adventure that he goes on inside actually brings out the true Carmichael, which is actually being conscious about people around us as well. So there are so many lessons in there, and it's quite hard to do that, man, to make a book that's entertaining and funny. It's funny, man. The similes you're dropping in there as well. It's just, I mean, I
Uh,
won't repeat some of them because some people might get offended. Like, it's quite cool, man. You made me laugh, and also you taught me a lot, which is wonderful to do without intentionally doing that. So I think this is a great thing for people to carry with them, just genuinely as a story. And I would say
Thank you,
share it
bro.
with kids, man. So honestly, you've done a great job here, man.
My fear was always that I would like end up, and it still is my fear, that I'll get lost between a rock and a hard place, because I've written it for middle grade kids, but I wrote it like I'd write it for myself. I wrote it like I'd write it for adults, but suitable for kids. So I haven't dumbed anything down, I haven't taken any of the edge off, and I've really, really tried to raise the bar in terms of like how much you have to think. And you can tell it's written by a rapper, right, with all the, like you say, the similes and all the plays on words. But I'm asking a lot from 10, 11, 12 year olds,
Yeah.
but I don't care. Like that's what I'm asking. You got to come along the ride. So I get a little bit scared that, oh my god, maybe older kids won't touch it because they'll think it's too young, and younger kids won't touch it because they think it's too complex. But fingers crossed, it'll be all right.
Yeah, but I feel like also what you got going for yourself is you've got that appeal there. You're using lots of slang talk as well that kids will connect with. They won't come across these words in every book they pick up, right? So
That's true.
straight away they're dipping into a book that actually almost connects with them. It speaks their language, their way of English as well, which is good. But at the same time, no one rises to low expectations in life. We know that. So by pitching it high, the kids will step up. I have no doubt. As a former full-time teacher myself, this is a perfect book to give to those children that have got that little extra something when it comes to reading, but they're not necessarily
That's who I'm after.
you want to get to.
Yeah.
You think, you know what, man, come on, you can do this. And then, oh, books are boring, sir, or I don't want to read. Books aren't cool, and they're typically reading books that maybe are under their level, but they know they're easy for them. Whereas this might actually persuade them to get into it. The similes, the metaphors, the jokes, the slang, and so on. But at the same time, once they're wrapped into it, you can't put it down. You want to know what happens. Does he deliver that comedy? Does he do it live? Oh, then he flops the first time. He walks off stage. It's not going to happen. Then he does it the second time, and it goes well for him, but not for anyone else. And then what happens the next time? And then obviously...
All right, we'll ease off on the spoilers from there. But
you know what else I think I really liked about this book? I don't know if you know my story, but I actually had a moment similar. I dropped a video a couple of years back and it went viral and ended up on the Ellen show in America.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when I was reading this, I was like, I've had that moment where
Wow.
you can't see anything, and I couldn't see anyone, and you just come out there and you don't. And when I went on Ellen, you don't meet Ellen. You don't meet on the actual day. You meet on the show. So the dress rehearsal was with Missy. So I really connected with it. So honestly,
And Misty is Ellen. I thought it's just going to be a legal nightmare if I make her Ellen.
I thought so.
I think most people will get that. And my kids love the Ellen show, and they love the kids on the Ellen show as well. So it's all just lifted like wholesale from Ellen. But actually, it was probably best not to make it Ellen, because I wanted to have some characters around that show who are maybe not the nicest. Do you know what I mean? And that's not something I wanted to say about real people. So
at the end of the day, I think what happens is truth always wins in the end, and good overpowers evil. And even Carmichael's journey, when he's experiencing his emotions and he's going back and forth, at the end, what shines is that positive message, and that actually family is so important, but also being yourself is the key. And I think, man, this is a fantastic job. I mean, I would say everyone go out and get it. It's brilliant. I loved it.
oh, that's really fine, man.
It's over. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself now.
That's so nice, man. I cannot wait to get it out there. And I know for a lot of novelists, I know because my sister and my brother-in-law are novelists, and it's not always their favorite thing to go out there and promote the book once they've written it, because the nature of a novelist is, you spend a lot of time sat private in intense intimacy and privacy on your own. But I'm really looking forward to having the skills that I've already got. I'm not, this is my first bash at writing a novel, so I'm not saying I'm like some skillful novelist, but I am skilled at selling words, in public. And I think I'm looking forward to the opportunity to getting in front of kids, especially boys, and just showing them that not all books are lame.
That's the mission, right? You know how powerful they are. I mean,
Yeah.
Carmichael's life, they can change. We know the facts, reading changes children's lives. So the fact that you're part of that promise and that program now, we're trying to get kids into books, is a wonderful thing. So yeah, and then the fact this is your first novel, it's only going to get better. I mean, I don't know how you're going to get better, but it's going to get better, right? You're going to keep improving.
Oh man, I mean, I'm already having a few sleepless nights about the follow-ups. Listen, all these guys on this panel today, they're like proper novelists. I feel like I'm really starting out. I'm learning, and I have to say I've no idea if I can do it again on the same level. But I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try and give it my best shot. But yeah, it terrifies me to have to do it again. I don't envy people who would describe themselves as a novelist as a lifetime career. Do you know what I mean? It terrifies me.
We'll get used to that feeling, bro, because everyone's expecting something after. So when's it out? June? It's publishing? Do we have a date?
June 10th, and yeah, I think there's not going to be much else I'll be talking about between now and then, because I really think Genuinely, I've done so many exciting and interesting things in my life, and I've been super privileged, super lucky on the journey that I've been on. But I don't think I've created anything as good as something I said. I genuinely mean that. I don't mean that. I'm not saying it just because I'm in this Bloomsbury meeting. Like, I can't think of anything that I've done where I look back on it. I'm reading the audiobook now as we speak. This week I'm recording it, right? So like, I've been in the studio today, I'm back in there tomorrow. And I read some chapters and I go, that's actually amazing. Who wrote that? And then other chapters, I'm like, ooh, I don't know about that, but you know what? I can't be, I just can't be bothered to change it now. So yeah, you know, listen, I cannot wait to get it out there. Cannot wait. Can't wait for people to hear the audiobook, because I'm not going to lie, I do a lot of audiobooks, but I don't think I've given what I've been given in the studio this week. Like, I've been going for it, every single word, every bar. Yeah, man, this is really something special to me, and yeah, it makes me so happy just holding that book in my hands.
I can see it, man. It's like, you know, at the end of the day, it's like your thoughts and ideas that finally crystallize in something tangible, and you've got it here. And not only have you got a physical copy in your hand like this, it's good, man. It's good,
Yeah,
you know, and it has a lot of potential to make big shifts in children's lives. It's not just about getting the story across to them. Like I said, it could be some form of handbook for change for kids. And like, I know we're wrapping up soon, but you know, if I can share that, keep listening, keep observing, keep writing. I mean, that's great advice from yourself, but I'm going to throw it back to you as well, bro. Keep listening to that feedback, keep observing what people say when it comes out, and keep
yeah,
writing. You've got a gift.
absolutely.
It's great. It's a special gift, and you continue to share it with the world, because it's a fantastic book, man.
Listen,
Honestly.
I will never stop, and that's something I said, that title, it has many meanings, and to me, it's super special because it's the first time. It's what's really hard as a writer is to say exactly what you want to say, and this is the first time I think I've done it wholesale from start to finish. And you know, I should shout out Ellen Holgate, because my editor at Bloomsbury, she's like given me that freedom to just express myself, you know, and where it hasn't quite worked, that's when she's jumped in. Whereas, trust me, like, I spend most of my time writing television, and it is like writing by committee. You got like 100 guys who like analyzing every word. No, I don't think you should say that. Don't think this should happen. It's so hard to get a flow going. So something I said is like, this is something I wanted to say. Do you know what I mean? That's what the title means to me. Whereas obviously on the surface, it's something crazy that he said that changed his life.
Oh, listen, it resonates. It really does. I mean, I bet people in the chat are talking now and saying they can't wait to read. I've seen a few things popping up. So it seems everyone's very excited. You can tell you're passionate about it. You can tell the purpose of being met here. And yeah, that was a great read. Honestly, I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thanks, man.
I'm looking for a signed copy though, bro, before you go.
Yeah, bruv, what are you talking about?
Come
Say
on.
nothing. I got like a little special pack for you, man, with some. Did you get the magnetic words?
I've got that. I've got
Oh,
that.
you got that. You got that. All right, I think of something else I can do to make the next package a little more special.
I love that, man. Ben Bailey Smith, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. You've headlined this event, and yeah, go out there and get the book, people. It's fantastic. You've done a great job, mate. Well done.
Thank you, bro.
No worries, man. Well done. Okay, we're moving into our next session now. Please welcome Claire Waze, author of The Lightning Catcher, and Sophie Kirtley, author of The Wild Way Home, July 2020, Waterstone's Book of the Month, to the virtual stage. Please join us, guys. Nice to see you.
Hi, nice to see you.
Hello, nice to
Hi.
see you.
Hi, nice to see you. How
I'm
are you?
Sophie Kirtley. Hello, Claire. I'm Sophie Kirtley, and thank you, MC Grammer. Thank you, Ben. That was really, really great to listen to. And actually, just before I begin properly, I have this, Ben, this lovely proof, but I haven't been able to read it because my 11-year-old son has stolen it from me. And for a child's view of it, I couldn't get him to focus on me at all today because he was just reading it in his bunk bed all afternoon. So it's a total hit with real life boy in my house. Anyway, hello everybody. I'm Sophie Kirtley. Like MC Grammer said, I'm the author of this, the lovely, gleamy Wild Way Home, Stone Age adventure set deep in the forest. And my new book's coming out in July. it is The Way to Impossible Island, also Stone Age, and this time set by the sea. I think you might have some little postcards if you got a special pack. But anyway, that's enough about me, because I'm not here to talk about my books. I'm here to talk about this beautiful, beautiful thing by this lovely, lovely lady. And it is The Lightning Catcher by Claire Weise. And this is coming in May. That's next month. Oh my word, where is time going? And it is just the most exciting, action-packed, warm-hearted, thrilling, kind of slightly mad story that you'll read this spring. It's beautifully written, and I know I've heard, even before I had my own copy, I was hearing so much about this online and from other people, and so I'm lucky enough to speak to Claire about it, and hopefully she'll tell us all a lot more about where this beautiful book has come from. So it's the story of Alfie Bradley. He moves to a village called Folding Ford, and here he encounters some rather strange events to start off with, and then he meets a creature who's even stranger than he could possibly imagine. I don't want to give too much away, but it really is, it's kind of like they've billed it as Skellig meets Stranger Things, and that's absolutely spot on, because it's got that lovely tenderness and warmth and humanity of Skellig, but then there's the sci-fi side of Stranger Things, and I just know kids are going to absolutely love this. I've been trying to wrestle this out of my children's hands as well, but I won on this one. So Claire, welcome, and thank you. Can I ask you to start off with, it's all about electricity. What was your spark? What brought you to this story, or what brought this story to you?
Well, thank you, Sophie, for such a fantastic intro to the book. That's lovely. My spark, well, I think really it was all my interests that were coalescing, I think, around particular things like dramatic weather and electricity, and things like the Snow Queen made a really big impact on me when I was a child. So ice and blizzards, I think they were always going to feature in my work if they could. I got the setting from the trees in our garden, actually, because these trees bend and sway and do everything that the trees in The Lightning Catcher do. So I had all these trees and wind and rain, and I had a boy with a burning curiosity to find out everything about everything. And so I wanted something to influence all that. And so I knew that my boy had been transplanted from somewhere else. So the whole theme of changing environments began to sort of emerge, and how we have to mold ourselves to fit them. And I started thinking, well, what if a very different creature came from somewhere, such a really different place, that the side effects of that fitting in were quite explosive. So that's how it started, really.
Oh, that's really fascinating to hear, because from those kinds of seeds, it's just grown into something really extraordinary. And the way you speak about it, I get that feeling of the atmosphere of the place, even listening to you speak, that really comes through in the book. But there's also, it's such a it's a very alive story. You never quite know what's going to happen next, because so many really surprising things happen. And I love how in the book you managed to pull together loads of opposites, like that lovely sort of calm setting you described, but then the encounter with something strange and dramatic. And that was what struck me most reading it. And I really genuinely did love the book, because it's got this kind of sci-fi world, which is so strange. And I do love reading sci-fi, but also it's got a kind of a real world warmth. You know, it's set now, Alfie Bradley, the main character, feels very real, very contemporary, very grounded in a way. And I'm just wondering, how did you manage to sort of bring together the real world and the kind of fantasy elements? Did that come easily to you, or was that something you had to wrestle to make them fit?
I didn't really have to wrestle. It just seemed to fall into place, to be honest. I mean, I think it's both sides of those two things are just me all over. I really like to read books that are set in the gritty here and now, but I always want to bend and stretch what's possible. So I think somebody once said about my writing that I play with a blend of the familiar and the strange, and that I stay right on the ambiguous edge between them. And I think that's true. So yeah, everything blended together. Once I had Alfie and the setting, everything just sort of blended really okay. But yeah, that's a lovely question. Thanks.
It feels really natural, actually, and I think Alfie does feel very real. So there's nothing sort of jarring in it. And I think perhaps because, you know, he's the kind of character that kids everywhere will just identify with, and the things that happen to him, I mean, within the sort of real world plot, there's sort of strands about family relationships, about friendships, about fitting in, tons of different things that kids everywhere will sort of hook into. And the more fantastical, otherworldly things you describe really just sort of merge in, and they become believable because his world feels so sort of true. Do you have any like favorite part of the book? Is there any bit that you really particularly loved while you were writing it, or now that it's complete?
I think the favorite parts changed while I was writing it, and now looking back, they're different from what they were. So I think now I really love the parts where there's trouble the most. So when Alfie goes trespassing and bites off more than he can chew, I really love the sense of that initial mistake that he made following him, you know, right throughout the book, which it kind of does. And I really like the sense of panic that he gets when things actually start coming home to his own doorstep, and he's having to try to keep a lid on everything. And like when something's got into the fridge at home or the cooker, or next thing it's in the walls and in his phone and things like that. So yeah, and I like the explosive parts, and I loved it when there are certain fireballs and certain lightning strikes that we won't go into for fear of spoiling. But I also love the friendship issues and all the family issues. So I liked it when Alfie ropes his friend in to investigate with him, his new best friend that he's made. And I quite like looking at the responsibility of persuading people to do things that they're not really sure about doing, and everything that comes with that. I think we've all done a bit of that, and how precious stretch friendships and how they can break and then mend again in a different shape. So yeah, lots of favourite parts, hard to pin it down.
Yeah, and it's really, I love the friendships within it, that not only Alfie's friendship with his real life best friend, but also the kinds of elements of a friendship between Alfie and the creature that that he encounters. I think that comes across so well, and again, utterly convincingly as well. The family relationships you mentioned, I think that Alfie's family, so he's got mum who's present, dad who's working away, and then his big sister, who are a really important part of the story, but not sort of in an in-your-face kind of a way. Did you enjoy writing the family elements of it?
Yes, I did. I really loved the family elements, especially the interplay between Alfie and his sister. I wrote some of that actually when my two children were a similar age to Alfie, and they were speaking to each other with that similar rhythm. So I really enjoyed getting that rhythm of it. And I'm an only child, so witnessing the sometimes explosive interactions between siblings, it was really entertaining for me. You know, the lines that they come out with and the wit that you can see sharpening against each other with each insult they give each other creates the invention of another even better one. So, and as an only child, that was quite a revelation to me, because you know, you can't speak to your friends like that, but your siblings are going to be there the next day, so you can.
They've no choice. They can't escape.
Yeah, exactly. And I also, even Alfie's dad, I quite related to him actually, because he was having his focus in the wrong place. He was looking at one child and worrying about one child when he really should have been worrying about the other. And I think that's something that can happen to parents. I think it's probably happened to me. So you know, you're looking over there, and then behind you the whole world is collapsing, and you don't even realize it. So yeah,
it's funny, isn't
I
it?
did love the family material.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Because we're writing books for children, yet at the same time, most of us sitting here are all grown-ups talking about the books that are written for children, and sort of trying to be appropriate judges of those. But I think, and reading it as an adult as well, you know, you pull out different things from it. And writing as adults, we're sort of putting different splatterings of our own lives sort of within the pages as well. Because as a real life grown up, you know, you've got a background in science, haven't you?
Yeah.
And I think that comes through really strongly in the story as well, because, you know, science fiction, it's part of it. Did you, when you were researching the book, did you bring science, your scientific background in a lot?
Yes, I did really. I mean, I didn't set out to write a sci-fi book as such. It was just, I don't know, it just always comes into it with me somehow. It just always does, because I think science is life, and science is really just everything around us. I couldn't anyway, I don't think, talk about a single thing without bringing some science into it, because it's just, but yeah, I tried to make everything as accurate as I could possibly get it. So the speculation was, it was more extrapolation rather than inventing from scratch. So like when Wizzy uses the magnetic tunnels that open up between the Earth and the Sun every 8 minutes, those are actually real things. So she can use them as portals because of what she's made of. So everything like that, even things down to like Wizzy squashing down and traveling like a text and through wires. And when Wizzy, she gets all confused because it took a lot of energy to ride the eddies and the waves in the outer layers of the sun where she's from. But down here on Earth, there's not really any energy needed for her. So when Alfie released her from the box, she's got all this surplus energy, and she discharges it in quite an extreme way, as we can see. So, but all of that is informed by the science of how I think anyway, that it would actually be with a creature like that. And I actually tested out the initial idea on my youngest son at the time when he was Alfie's age, and he was fine with my origin story. You know, he didn't bat an eyelid. He actually said, well, some animals can live in water without dying, so why shouldn't some creatures be able to live close to the sun without burning? You know, it kind of made sense to him. So especially if you're made of light and electricity in the first place. So yeah, so I imagine your research for your Stone Age setting, did you find the same issues with bringing that in a natural way? And
yeah, I know what you mean, because we're trying to sort of talk about real things, but at the same time make them, I don't know, infuse them with fun and stories and wrap them all up in something that's readable and juicy. But yeah, researching the Stone Age, I just lived in the Stone Age for the last few years, and it's been really, really fun. But again, I think having a book which is based here and now at its heart, and having those relationships, is really the thing that for me really made the writing, the research behind the writing come to life. But I've got my eye on the clock, and I know that we're about to start eating into other people's time, so yeah. I'm gonna have to wrap it all up. But before I do, can I just say, honestly, this is such a fun, brilliant, funny book as well, and it's coming in, it's in May, isn't it, Claire? 13th of May. So that's when it'll be there super soon, and you all have to read it. So there.
Can I say as well that Sophie's book, her next book, The Way to Impossible Island, is out on the 8th of July. And I heard a synopsis of it the other day, and it sounds brilliant. So I can't wait.
Me too.
Sophie.
Thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Claire, Sophie. That was amazing. I love listening to you. Expect some signed copies, of course. I'm racking them up this evening. Right, next up, we have two young adult fantasy superstars coming to us live all the way from the US. Please welcome Kalynn Bayron, author of The Poison Heart, and Brigid Kemmerer, author of Defy the Night. How you doing, guys? Nice to meet you. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. Hey, Brigid.
Hi. It's so good to be meeting with you.
Yeah, so we'll do some quick intros. I'm Kalynn Bayron. I'm the author of Cinderella is Dead, which came out this past summer, and the forthcoming This Poison Heart. It's a contemporary YA fantasy, and so This Poison Heart is the story of 16-year-old Briseis Green, a young woman born with a unique ability. She can control plants. She can make them grow from tiny seeds to full bloom in just minutes, and the grass is literally greener on her side of the street. When Briseis comes into possession of a sprawling estate just outside of Rhinebeck in upstate New York, that is left to her by her recently deceased auntie, she and her parents go up for the summer to check it out, only to discover that the house comes with a very specific set of instructions, a walled garden filled with the deadliest plants on the planet, and a secret so closely guarded that even the threat of its revelation might convince the gods themselves to intervene. Briseis, my main character, she knows that she would kind of go to the ends of the earth for the people that she loves, but as she kind of steps into her power and begins to understand its genesis, she realizes that she might have to go farther than that. So this story for me is equal parts Little Shop of Horrors, The Secret Garden, and Hades Town.
That's so awesome, and it's so good. I can't wait for other people to read it. So for anybody who doesn't know me, which maybe everyone, I'm so excited to be talking to people in the UK. My name is Brigid Kemmerer. I am from Baltimore, Maryland, which is on the East Coast of the USA. I am the author of the Cursebreaker series, which starts with A Curse So Dark and Lonely. And my next book comes out this fall in September 14th, Defy the Night. I am super excited about it. Whereas the Cursebreaker series had a little bit of a portal into our world where the main character kind of came from Washington, D.C. In Defy the Night, it is completely second world fantasy. So there is no connection to our world. There's no connection to the Cursebreaker series. It's brand new. And it is about a kingdom called Kandala that is ruled by this ruthless king named Harriston and his younger brother, Prince Korik. And the reason they need to be so brutal is that the kingdom is somewhat overrun by this illness that can only be cured by drinking an elixir made from an elusive moonflower. Now, the only people who have access to this medicine are people with wealth because they can buy access to it. And there's this underground smuggling trade. There are a lot of things going wrong in the kingdom. So the king and his brother need to be pretty brutal to make sure that medicine is distributed equitably. Now, there's a girl named Tessa who was raised as an apothecary by her parents, and she has taken it upon herself to become an outlaw and steal medicine from people who have what she thinks is too much and distribute it to people who really truly need it. And she has a best friend named Weston, who is also an outlaw, and he helps her distribute this elixir. But one day something happens to Weston, and Tessa takes it upon herself to avenge him. And when she breaks into the palace intending to confront the king and his cruel brother, she discovers that everything she thought she knew about this illness, about Kandala, about the way the kingdom was being ruled is not correct. And if she really wants to make things better for her people, she's going to need to start a revolution and break things from the inside out. And again, that comes out September 14th. I'm so excited about it. And I'm so glad that we get to talk about our books together.
Yeah.
Kalynn, I think one of the things I love most about your writing is that everything is really character driven. You know, there's always an amazing plot, but you really tend to focus on the characters. And can you tell me, where did the whole inspiration for Briseis and This Poison Heart come from?
Yeah, so it's a lot of different things. I think that it's a combination of my love of Gothic fiction. This is a contemporary story, but there's that very kind of classic haunted, scary kind of house on the hill, and there's a lot of secrets inside the house, a lot of family secrets. So I have, so there's definitely kind of a Gothic inspiration there. Also, I love Little Shop of Horrors, and I talk about this all the time. This is a huge, that musical was hugely influential for me for this specific story. I also really, I was really obsessed with The Secret Garden as a kid. And so I had all of these things kind of, you know, in my head. And then more recently, a few years ago, I saw a piece that was written, and I can't remember exactly where I saw it, but it was about a poison garden. It was about this place in, I think it's called Alnwick Garden in England, and it's full of like 100 different varieties of poison plants, and people are allowed to visit it, but they can't smell the flowers, they can't touch them, they can't you know, come anywhere close to them, and the caretaker has to kind of suit up in order to go in there so that he's not harmed by these plants. And I just thought it was really fascinating. And so I had this kind of spark where I was like, okay, I'm going to do a story that's kind of all of these weird and wonderful things that I love all rolled into one. And then my main character, Briseis, because this story does involve some Greek mythology. She's, you know, she is just this young woman who is born with this power that she's struggling to control. But she also is in high school, and she's dealing with her friends and relationships and her parents. And so I think it was just, you know, she's just kind of this typical teen who has this very unique ability. And how do you kind of navigate all the things you need to do as a teenager when you have this other thing, this kind of burden, and she has to kind of decide if it really is a burden or if it's more of a blessing in disguise. And so this story is just about her journey to discovering where that power comes from and who she is and what she stands for. And so, yeah, I really just love this story. I love centering, you know, queer Black girls, and her moms are also queer, and so it's you know, it's kind of a just a mashup of all the things that I really love and am passionate about. So that's kind of my inspiration. But what about you, Brigid? What about Defy the Night? What inspired your story?
So when I sat down to put together a new fantasy book, I tend to try to look at things that I loved when I was a teenager, when I was reading fantasy growing up. And if anybody's familiar with any of my books, I tend to take like a really happy idea, like, yay, I want to do outlaws, you know, like Zorro or something like that. And then tie it to something a little heavier, you know, and say, oh, what if everyone is really sick and dying and the rulers of this kingdom are really brutal and executing people? And I really spent a lot of time thinking about the obligations that people in power have to their people. Also, you know, I realize we're talking to people in the UK, in the United States, we don't have, you know, socialized medicine. We don't, you know, not everybody has access to medicine. Not everybody has access to insurance or being able to pay for things. You know, I feel like every day somebody on Facebook is sharing another GoFundMe for a neighbor who might have cancer. So I really took all of these things and kind of tried to put them in a fantasy novel. I love writing fantasy for teens because I feel like it makes things that are really complex, really accessible, kind of in a different way. And that was kind of my original genesis for the whole kingdom of Kandala and the king and his brother, and then Tessa and Weston, who were doing what they could from their side of things. Now, in This Poison Heart, Bree's parents are very, very present and involved in her day-to-day life, which is definitely something you don't always see in YA. I feel like in YA, the parents are always dead, and I am 100% guilty of that in Defy the Night. How do you center a protagonist like that when her parents are so knee-deep in her business?
Yeah, so I think it's funny because it is one of those tropes, and I use it too. Like in Cinderella's Dead, Sophia's parents are kind of, they're there, but they're not there. She's kind of going off and doing her own thing, and it's easier that way sometimes. But I'm always kind of fascinated by how parents and guardians and caretakers, how they kind of play a role in these stories. And for This Poisoned Heart, I really wanted to, Bree has a really strong relationship with her moms. And so I wanted to be able to let Bree have this kind of freedom and have these, kind of solve these mysteries and try to figure out what's going on. But, what does that look like when your parents are there and making sure that you have your phone and you have a curfew and you have, all of these things that Briseis has. And so it's just endlessly kind of fascinating to me, to see how parents kind of play a role, because just for me personally, like I couldn't be out saving the world, when I was 16. Like my dad would have been like, where are you? What are you doing? What, you know what I mean? Like it couldn't have been me. So, I wanted to bring that into this story. And I also just really wanted to showcase queer Black families. This is Briseis and her two moms, and they have a very loving relationship. They are very close, and it's just another type of family that I don't think we get to see very often. And so I wanted to center that, and I wanted to give Mom and Mo, that's what Bree calls them. I wanted to give them this very this kind of supportive role for Briseis, and I think it affects everything in the story, because them being so close to her, it also kind of puts them in danger when Briseis starts to uncover these things out in Rhinebeck. So I just think it's fascinating, and I probably will go back at some point to some other stories where the parents are just kind of out of the picture. But it's nice to have, kind of a mix of both things. But in Defy the Night, Prince Corrick makes some really brutal choices in the name of justice, for the greater good. But Tessa doesn't see it that way. So, some may draw parallels to kind of current events. So did you set out to write a book about the pandemic? Like, what is the timeline there for like when you were drafting this story and what was going on? Was it like pre-COVID or like the beginning of COVID, or how did that work?
It was 100% pre-COVID. And I know with the book coming out this year that so many people are going to say, oh, it's a pandemic book. It is not a pandemic book. And really, even though the kingdom is kind of overrun by this illness, it's really more about the people and what the people are doing and what people are willing to do. And in Prince Corrick's case, what the rulers have to do to kind of maintain order. But it was fascinating because I completed the book by October of 2019. So, I had written the entire first draft, and my editor sent me, my edit letter with all of her changes. And she said, don't read this now. We need to finish A Vow So Bold and Deadly. Let's just wait until, the middle of next year, meaning 2020. And it was fascinating to go back and read some of her notes that were all written pre-pandemic about, this is not how people would react if everyone was getting ill. And now we can say, oh, you're right. It is not how people would react if everyone was getting ill. So it ended up, that the book will definitely draw some parallels, but it was not intentional whatsoever. And I know we are running out of time, so I think we could probably do one quick lightning round question. And I think a fun one would be, what is the last great book you read?
So I am going to, and I had a similar question like several months ago, and I still have the same answer because I went back and reread the book again for the 50th time, but it's The Changeling by Victor Laval. It is one of my most favorite books of all time. And it's a mix of fantasy and horror, and it's a contemporary setting. And so, yeah, I cannot recommend that book enough. And maybe in the future when someone asks me the same question, I'm going to say the same thing, because it's just, I go back and I reread it so many times. So that's the last book that I read again. What
That's
about you?
awesome. So I'm going to name one that I am in the middle of because it is really good and it's an advanced copy. So it's not out yet, but I'm reading Beasts of Prey by Ayanna
Oh,
Gray.
yes.
It's so good. It's so good. I'll send it to you when I'm done if you need it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yes. Oh, I'm looking forward to that. Yes.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I know we're out of time. So thank you for taking the time to chat with me. And thanks to everyone for listening in.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kalynn. Thank you, Brigid. Great to have you. Next up, we have a video from Jessie Burton, the internationally best-selling author of The Miniaturist, talking to Jean Menzies, who is a PhD student in classics, podcaster, bookstagrammer and booktuber, about Medusa, a dazzling feminist retelling of the Greek myth, illuminating.
Thank you so much for taking some time out to talk to me. This is my favourite subject to talk about, Greek myths, and I read Medusa and loved everything about it, so I know there's going to be plenty to talk about. Something that I always wonder about when I read anything to do with Greek mythology, and I think partially because we all have such different experiences, is where did you first come across this myth? Where did you meet Medusa?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think for me, they're so prevalent in your sort of imagination from quite a young age. Not that you're necessarily reading them, but they're so ancient and they're so sort of everywhere that I can't actually remember when I was first told the story of Medusa. I just always knew there was this head with snakes, and that was it. And I think probably it came more from paintings and visual art than maybe reading about her, particularly the Caravaggio painting. I remember seeing that when I was fairly young. It's extremely arresting image of Medusa with her eyes wide and sort of screaming. And then there's the Bernini sculpture. But in terms of the actual real story of Medusa, in terms of what happens to her, I didn't know it. I just knew there was this head with snakes that Perseus carried around, and that was it. And that's always been with me. I think she's a very impactful image as a myth. So yeah, I've always carried her around, a bit like Perseus.
I like that idea, actually. I like the idea, though, that there's sort of like a whole host of modern women sort of taking her head from Perseus and be like, ours now, we'll take it.
Well, it was so weird as well, because I suppose Athena ends up with her face on her shield. So it's this odd thing that Athena does this terrible thing to this young girl by cursing her, but then also ends up utilizing that rage and that power for herself.
Yeah, it's I think, as you've already sort of started to touch on there, it is a much more complex story than the sort of idea that maybe Clash of the Titans gives you, just this painting of a monster. There's a lot going on there. And was there particular themes of the original myth that you wanted to draw out that you didn't feel necessarily got as much attention from pop culture?
Definitely, because I think the main thing you take away from her initially is how fearful she is, or how horrifying or monstrous. But actually, when I read the origin story, and I realized, oh, this is just too good to be true, because here you have this argument about beauty and monstrosity, particularly in young women, and how Medusa is a beautiful young woman who gets severely objectified. Her whole sense of self is possessed by other people. She's punished for her beauty, she's punished for her ugliness, and she's sort of left powerless. And I found that to be a very resonant story in terms of, my own experiences, or the experiences of other women and younger women that I've known and know. And I just thought, this is so interesting, because all we normally know about Medusa is obviously the head of snakes, but also that she was just a cipher for Perseus to go on his quest of heroism. And actually, to know that as a novelist or as a writer, to know she had this whole backstory. She had sisters, she lived on the edge of night, she was half, her parents were sea gods, and you just didn't know any of that stuff. Well, I certainly didn't. I'm not a classicist, so yeah, I just thought there's a lot there that can be repurposed, but not even really changed that much, but just explored for a modern reader.
Absolutely, and really, like, there, as much as it seems that there's a sort of renewed popularity in the Greek myth retelling, I cannot really think of many other retellings of Medusa. So it's exciting to think that a book like yours might mean that more people know that story, right? The one that not many people know. And I love.
I'm really glad I got in there.
Yes, yes. Do I like honestly? I'm so shocked that more people haven't, and I'm so glad that you have. I remember like first seeing that you were writing this book with Bloomsbury. I feel like it was quite a while ago and being really excited about it. So that is so cool. And I particularly love that it has like a not a young audience in mind, but like a teen audience upwards in mind. Because like you said, this is something, the sort of whittling down of women to their looks happens from quite a young age. And I wondered if like you always knew when you wanted to write this book that it was going to sort of appeal to young women.
I think so. The first book I did with Bloomsbury was The Restless Girls, and that's for a younger audience, sort of aged 8 to about 11, 12. And I knew that the next one I wanted to do, and I wanted to do Medusa, that the themes in it are a little more adult. I think they are a little more relevant to women, young women of age, you know, sort of 13, 14, 15. And I just thought that that's kind of what I wanted to do with the story. But I wanted to make sure that I kind of held on to the epic quality of Greek myth. So it's quite poetic. She kind of calls herself the sailor poet. So that the language, the lexicon is quite rich, and then it sort of switches into conversational. But I just thought it was just too tempting not to put her into first person. And I've been 15. I remember, I'm not that old that I can't remember it, but you know, it's a really hard time, and it can be a brilliant time, of course, but it can be hard. And I thought, you know, that the character of Medusa was just so ripe for the retelling.
For all that tragedy though, like at the end, for me as a reader, the book felt quite hopeful. Was that something was that your intention with the ending?
Definitely. I think throughout the book, you know, it's really important that, you know, I brought her sisters in, and there's so much love there. There's so much protectiveness. There's so much happiness as well, like her childhood and her love of the sea and fishing, and her sense of home that she feels with those girls. But absolutely, there are so many women heroines, or not heroines, just women in general in literature, who are never fully fleshed, and they are always there just for the boys or the men to kind of either have conquest, or to rescue, or to, you know, talk about their mothers, or whatever. But to give Medusa back her own sense of self, which has been robbed from her, to let her learn how to love herself and to accept herself, which is can sound so glib. We say that kind of stuff a lot, but it's actually a lifelong journey for so many of us to understand who we are and why we are. And it was just such a privilege to be able to use the myth of Medusa to kind of create this young woman who goes through a really hard time, but also learns so much about herself and ends up with hope.
Yeah, that wholeheartedly comes across like throughout the novel. I have to say, not to spoil the novel, but you have put your own unique stamp on it. Is it compared to your like quite wide array of other works now, is it quite different as an opportunity to write a retelling?
Yeah, definitely. It's oddly freeing, because there's sort of a framework there, and then you can not quite rebel, but you can think imaginatively against the restrictions of the original. And I like to think that, you know, myths are so sturdy that they're quite able to be reinterpreted. And fundamentally, they were made up at some point anyway. Like they're not like. And I just thought, you know, the ending is different to what we know. I don't want to give the spoilers, but it was very liberating to just totally reinvent the story from beginning to end, and the ending for me makes complete sense. Otherwise I don't think I'd have written it, but yeah, it was it was a very enjoyable job, because it's still a job for me, I suppose, but it was good to have all the fundamentals there and then to get to play with them without having to think up the fundamentals in the first place.
Yeah. You have to make up the people, but you can sort of flesh them out, which is like
Totally. And to sort of create Perseus as this, young man who is pretty much, trapped under the yoke of his toxic masculinity and doesn't really want to do the things that he's supposed to do as a hero, and having them as this kind of star-crossed couple for a while, that was fun to do. And to sort of bring in the personality of Athena and her fickleness and all that sort of thing was extremely fun. I mean, I both of my books for younger readers, I've really truly enjoyed doing.
It was wonderful to read. They felt like people and not mythological figures. They felt very real, which was wonderful. Would you ever consider writing another Greek myth retelling?
I don't know. I think at the moment, honestly, no, not because I'm like, it's just the Medusa for me, it was just speaking to me. And I was aware, like you said, that it hasn't been done that often, or certainly not in such a sort of in-depth way. So I'm not sure. I've got other things that I'm supposed to be doing, but I mean, I love reading them. And obviously they're just so rich, and like I said, they're always so sturdy that you can always go back to them and rewrite them, or like reinterpret them. So maybe one day.
Yeah, never rule it out. But like you said, you've given voice to a woman of myth who rarely gets given a voice, and that's just a wonderful thing. Thank you so much for telling me more about the whole writing process. I obviously have already had the privilege of reading it, but I'm sure everyone else will be super excited to know that it's out on October 14th and they'll be able to get their hands on it, plus all the beautiful illustrations. It's stunning, honestly.
Thank you. Yeah, those paintings by Olivia are really, really out of this world. So lucky that she said yes.
It feels like all aspects of classical art are there, from like the poetic writing to the sort of beautiful detailed artwork.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I'm delighted to introduce to you Mina Alexander, feature editor at Stylist magazine, who's going to be speaking to Melissa Cummins-Quarry and Natalie A. Carter about their debut book, Grown, an ode to Black girlhood and a celebration of Black British culture from the founders of the Black Girls Book Club.
Thank you so much, and hi everyone, I hope you're all really well. I am so happy to be here talking to my brilliant friends Melissa Cummins-Quarry and Natalie A. Carter, aka the masterminds behind the hugely successful Black Girls Book Club. And I mean, Black Girls Book Club has become a haven for Black women to celebrate themselves, celebrate the books that they love. I mean, powerhouse writer Roxane Gay herself calls it, and I quote, the most stylist and chic thing she's ever done. And now Melissa and Natalie are blessing us with a book all of their own, which I'm so lucky to have read already, and it's called Grown, the Black Girl's Guide to Glowing Up. It truly is the handbook I wish I had in my teenage years. I mean, you've got everything from how to care for your hair, to finding your squad, to dealing with microaggressions. It's packed with so much wisdom and honest stories and sisterly advice. The first thing I want to ask you both is, what sparked that initial idea for writing this book?
Do you want to go first, babe?
I knew he was going to say that, and I'm literally here thinking, I don't know if I was going to go first for this question. I'll go first, but Mo, you're going to come in straight after.
Of course, always.
But basically, I think for us, when we were doing events with Black Girls Book Club and we were speaking to women, a lot of what we were talking about and a lot of the conversations we were having were always about things that we wish we had known when we were younger. And so Melissa was kind of like, Nats, like there's a common theme every time, like we need to do something for young Black women. They might not be able to come to Prosecco because it's, brunch. Yeah, I call it Prosecco instead of brunch. Because that's what we do at the brunch. You know what I mean? They might not be able to come to brunch because it's boozy and because it's adult, but they can still be raised up and grown in a way that encourages them to be confident, to take control of their lives, and to know that every single environment they're in, they can shine and they can be their authentic selves. And so when Mel said that to me, it was kind of like, yeah, why not?
Can I just say, this is the first time she's ever admitted that it was my idea.
Yeah, it was Melissa's idea.
Imagine, can you imagine? It's been like 2 years. So let me just take a moment. But yeah, I think with the idea of the book, as Natalie said, we are really passionate about Black women and creating spaces for women to just come together and just be themselves unapologetically. And as Natalie said, the running theme for all of the women that kind of come to our events is, I wish I'd had this when I was younger. I wish I had this when I was growing up. I wish I had this kind of friendship group. Natalie and I are so, like, we're lucky, we've got one another. And I think a lot of the girls that come to our events have been able to find friends and friendship, and we've made a real sisterhood. And I think our main thing that we wanted to do with Grown was to kind of create a handbook, like a guide for young girls who are just trying to figure life out and not knowing what to do. Because when we were growing up, we didn't know what to do. It's been a struggle, like, to get here. And like now we're like in our 30s and we've kind of got it made. But I really wish that somebody just said to me, like, chill, it's going to be all right. I think if I'd known at 13, 14 that my life would be like what it is now, I'd have been overjoyed. But at the time, it just seemed like everything was difficult. Friendship was difficult, you know. I don't know, what should I spend my money on? Or should I get those cool trainers? Or, you know, is it okay for me to be a nerd? And like, yeah, it's quite cool to be a nerd, actually. But I wish someone had told me that at the time. And yeah, I think Grown is just like a manifestation of the love that Natalie and I have for one another, but also what Black Girls Book Club is about. So if you haven't been to an event, you know, you haven't kind of had that camaraderie with us and had booze and brunch and all that kind of book stuff, you'll read Grown and you'll kind of get that vibe. And it's kind of like Black Girls Book Club, Melissa and Natalie personified.
Basically.
Basically.
It's so true. It feels, I mean, you both have such warm, like, authentic voices that come through in the book, which is what I love. It feels like a friend is talking to you, someone who's got your back. And I mean, I'll put you on the spot here. One of my favorite chapters is probably, you know, the one that's all about self-love, confidence. That feels like it will have a huge impact on young girls, young women. Can you both choose a favorite chapter? Is that too hard?
Yes, I can't necessarily choose a favorite chapter, but what I really enjoyed was reading Natalie's chapter on, was it on microaggressions, babe?
Yeah.
Because when I read Natalie's chapter, I was like, okay, I need to write a chapter to go alongside it. But it was, you know, it was so good. And I was like, why didn't we think about writing this bit before? And microaggressions and gaslighting is something, when you're younger, you don't have a name for it. You just know that something isn't right. And you tell people, and then some people brush it off. And I think having the book club and having that kind of space, we'd mention things that we'd try to brush off. And then so many other people had the same experience. And you start to realize that you're not mad, that people are behaving in that way towards you, and you don't have to kind of limit it. So when Natalie wrote that chapter, I was so blown away. I remember I called right back, that chapter was sick. I'm inspired. So I had to go and do my own little chapter, like, to complement it. But yeah, I think my favorite chapter was Natalie's on microaggressions, are really eking that out. And I think especially for women kind of all over the world, we all have those experiences where someone's done something to us or said something to us and we know it's not right and we don't want to appear hysterical. You know, so I think having this kind of mapped out in a book for young girls is going to empower them. And that's just what we want to do. We want to kind of give young girls, and anyone really, I think, who reads the book, kind of the power to kind of feel that they can take on the world. And just be brave about it.
Yeah, I think my favorite chapter is Squad Goals, because I think that's one of the first chapters that Mel wrote. And I remember just thinking, having friendships when you're a teenager can be something of so much distress, like when you have friends, then your friend's not talking to you, then you're falling out over something so big, and how do you make it work, and how do you get back? And so I just thought, if I would have had that chapter that was so kind of like coherently, beautifully written, saying like, this is a good friend, this is a red flag, this is how I treat my friends, these are boundaries that you can have with your friends, and it's okay to have these boundaries. I feel like my teenage years, specifically like I would say 14 to 16, because obviously me and Mel went to the same school, but I was in CGK, she was in TWI, and CGK.
You don't know what that is, babes. Guys, just imagine going to a Harry Potter type school. In our school, you weren't allowed to go in like particular corridors. The teachers will come out and they'll grab you up.
Like separated. So I was on one half.
So she was in her own corridor in her own area. I was in my own area. So it's surprising we were even friends. She was in a very dusty house. Very dusty.
Exactly. And so I was in like an area where, you know, if it wasn't good in that group, like your life was over. 9 times out of 10, it wasn't good in that group. And I just read that chapter and I was like, there's certain people I could have just dashed away when I was 14 if I would have just had like the guide or because I don't have a big sister. So that's why the book is really important to me, because I grew up not feeling that there was like another kind of cousin or woman I could speak to. So that's the type of mindset I tried to put myself in. I tried to remember that kind of isolation, like if you don't have a big sister or cousin that you can trust. And I was just like, this is something that my big sister would tell me when I would go to her with like issues about mad people and CGK and not being able to be with my friend Melissa and Twy. Like, do you know what I mean? And but it was good because I feel like even as an adult, it teaches you how to be a better friend, that chapter, as well as realize, you know, that friend might not be good for you, but are you the friend that you really want? So I have to say that's my favorite chapter.
I totally agree with that analogy of an older sister as well, because like you say, even with the friendship chapter, it's teaching you how to be a good friend as well. There's that element of tough love, and you know, you're not glossing over anything. I mean, you are big women, but do you feel like you did any growing of your own when you were writing this? You know, you really delved deep into some topics, you spoke to amazing contributors.
Oh, you know what? I do feel like I grew, I'll be honest with you. Because I think when we had the idea for the book, you got your tea, I've got my little tea as well.
Sorry, I was just parched.
But yeah, when we had the idea for the book, I think we were very much like, yeah, we're going to write it. We're going to get all our famous friends to come in and like give little bits of advice. Yeah, that's it. It's going to be easy. Then I sat down and I wrote these chapters, and there were times where I was crying because it was so much, kind of reliving kind of what it meant to be a 13, 14-year-old and going through things where you genuinely feel like it's the end of the world. Like you have an argument with your girlfriend, you don't realise that, like, you know, a few years from now you'll be in uni, you'll meet new friends, you know, and that like
the end of the world. It's the end of the world.
And it's just kind of navigating those types of things. I think for me, doing the chapter which discussed different stereotypes and tropes of Black women, like the angry Black girl and those, I think that really rocked me, I'll be honest, because it was, I'd had to really relive things that people had said to me or how people had made me feel. And I think I've been very lucky to have such an amazing friend in Natalie that when we've had those issues, I've told her, she's like, oh, F them, like, who cares? Like, you know, like, don't worry about it, it's fine.
I'm your friend. Why do you even care about other friends? I told you to have other friends.
Who cares what they said? No one cares. Like, and then having to just write that and get back into that mindset and really explain what it means when someone kind of says that you're an angry Black woman, or when somebody kind of, you know, judges you just for who you are, what you look like, and explaining that to young girls and kind of allowing themselves to feel empowered so they don't kind of have that on their shoulders. That was, for me, that was really, really tough, because I think the older you get, you get over it, you know, you kind of build up all these different walls and you're just like, yeah, I'll do this. But, you know, when you revert back to that little girl, yeah, that was difficult, I think, for me, but it was cathartic. Yeah. That's what I think
I think it was difficult as well, because the beginning of microaggressions chapter, I actually talked about something that happened to me as a child. And now, you know, having the kind of language to say like, that's a microaggression, that's a this, that's that. Whereas at the time it happened to me, I don't want to ruin the book. And then my mum knew it happened and we never really spoke about it. And then all of a sudden I wasn't doing something that I really deep down wanted to do. And so that, I didn't realize how painful that was, because I think sometimes when you're trying to talk to younger women as well, you need to talk to them in a way that uplifts them. We're not here to frighten you, and we're not here to kind of have you put an armor on and close yourself off from the world. We're here to kind of encourage you, support you, because we want you to bloom and we want you to be authentic and we want you to be you. And with that is your life source, that's your unique point, that's your offering to the universe. And so like going back to a real experience just to show and say so many things without literally saying, this is what happened. I didn't realize how much that upset me. And then other things, especially like I wrote a chapter about faith because I come from a very like strict Christian family. And I just thought it would be good to write about that, to allow the conversation about how to make your own decisions about what type of person you want to be and what you believe. And like, I didn't realize how much resentment I had because of the way I had grown up. And so putting that in the chapter, I was like, oh my God, I need to go and get on the phone to my counsellor. Call Janet. Janet, you're right. You know what I mean? But so we put so much of ourselves in this, and like squad goals, like Melissa is talking about relationships she's actually had with her friends. We're talking about things that actually happened to us. So yeah, it's like I just took out a bit of my heart and just put in the book in it.
Literally, yeah. It's one thing I think what's really special about this book, and we spoke about it so many times, for a young Black girl growing up, things aren't made especially for us. We're not really kind of catered to. So, you know, you're catered to as like a little girl, and then nothing, and then you're grown, and that's it. And teenage Black girls are still girls, and I think sometimes there's this kind of tendency to forget about that. So with this book, we really wanted to create something that was just for them, so when they're reading it, they can see that we were thinking about them, you know, and had them in mind. It's not like a book that's kind of for someone who's a bit older that you can just give to them. Because when we were at that age, we were reading some things we shouldn't have been reading, like The Coldest Been Forever, like what was it, Fly Girl, like all of these kind of really naughty, saucy books.
Wait into Excel, Sliding Doors, everything.
Waiting to Excel at 14, that's a bit much. Do you know what I mean? So
I'm not married to this day. I did something. I'm not even joking.
Like, we didn't have something that was just for us. It was so important to us to create something. So when a young Black girl gets this book and she has it in her hand, she knows that we had her in mind, and it's not just something that was written that you're just going to give to, you know, your little sister, or like one of your cast-offs. This is something that was directly for her. So this was kind of one of the most important things I feel like I've ever done. Like I've done a lot of cool things in my life, but for me, this is probably one of the most important things I've done, especially with my best friend.
Yeah, no, thanks, babes.
That's what I love as well. Like you say, there's so much of yourselves in it, but also your friendship, which just makes it so special. And I mean, I feel like it's going to change so many people's lives. I don't say that lightly at all. I think it's so special. I think we're out of time, but you know, thank you both so much. And as I said, I think you've done such an empowering, glorious thing.
Thank you.
Can't wait for it to be out in the world on the 30th of September, available to pre-order now, everyone. And thanks for chatting to me. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sweetheart. Bye.
Thank you, Mina, Natalie, and Melissa. Sometimes it's hard to find the right words, but Sarah Crossan has just the antidote with her new poetry anthology, Tomorrow is Beautiful, offering calm, hope, and peace to all. Here's Sarah to tell us a bit more about the collection, and perhaps will even treat us to a reading.
Thank you. Cheers. I'm so glad to be able to finish up the evening. For all of those of you who have managed to stay stay with us, there's quite a lot of people to listen to. I've absolutely loved listening to everybody, and I feel so lucky to be with Bloomsbury. Just fantastic books that are up and coming, so I'm very excited. I have been looking to see who's attending, and I was thinking, oh, it's really nice doing it online, but actually I just want to drink some warm wine in a stuffy bookshop and have some cupcakes. So I saw that it was like, who's on there, like Amy, Joy, Julia, Fiona, who else? Nicolette, Scott, Berylis, Jenny, Trisha. So hello to all of you. And I hope that we'll get to see one another really soon and have that warm wine, because there's nothing better. So this is an anthology that I'm so excited to be able to curate. I'm always a little bit coy when it comes to celebrating my own work. I don't find that easy at all, but because most of these poems are not mine, I feel really excited about it. I'm really excited to share them. I'm really, really proud of what I'm doing with Bloomsbury for this collection. This was the cover that I suggested, but sadly my editor thought it wasn't good enough. So cover is coming soon. The cover reveal is coming soon. I actually sold this book to Bloomsbury when things were going okay. I'm a bit of a glass half full person. Anybody who has met me will sort of know that about me. Probably a bit of a Pollyanna. And I was so excited. I said, you know, after this pandemic, wouldn't it be great to have a collection of poems about how hopeful life can be and how bright it is at the end of the tunnel? And they thought this was a fantastic idea. And just, I don't know how many days it was after the deal had been done that I moved house. I injured my eye. My mum became very sick. We had no broadband and I was homeschooling. And I was honestly in the most massive pit of despair. And the glass was not half empty. The glass was completely empty. And I just couldn't see a road out of it. I just felt so miserable. I was in so much pain and I was alone, basically, which is, I think, what has happened to a lot of people. We've kind of really been faced with ourselves. and I don't know, a bit of an existential crisis I think a lot of people have had during this lockdown, and friends that I have known who have very buoyant personalities and are generally like me have found this pandemic really difficult. But actually what has been amazing is that in curating this collection, I did manage to get myself out of the pit, because all I was doing was reading hopeful poetry and poetry about living in the present. And so I'm really selfishly excited about this book, because I want all of the poems that have helped me during this time in one place, and that's all I really care about. That's what my goal is in editing this book, is making sure that I have all these beautiful poems in one place. And I do keep emailing my editor and saying, can we just slip this other one in? And I do keep emailing her and saying, can I have a little bit more time to write another poem, so that I can slip that one in as well, as I start to analyze a little bit more deeply what has gone on in lockdown, and as I start to kind of look at myself and feel less angry about things and feel brighter myself. And the collection was not just really about coming out of a pandemic. It was also, I was the Irish Children's Literature Laureate for 2 years, and we, as part of that role, I did a project called We Are the Poets. And the point of that was to go into schools and communities and reach young people and say to young people that poetry was for them, that it belonged to them, that they didn't need to feel outside of it, that it didn't belong to academics, and that they should embrace it, and that they were entitled to embrace it and entitled to use it. And so it's also about that. The collection is also about presenting poetry in a way that's really accessible. So I've tried to choose poems that will not make the reader feel silly, and also they'll be annotated. So I may suggest things to think about when a reader is reading, or explain why I chose a particular poem. And one of the really exciting things about the collection is that we have managed to include a young man who we found during the We Are the Poets project. And that's one of the most exciting things, is that we have this young poet who has never been published before, and he's going to be part of the collection. He's written this most amazing poem that I can't wait for you to read. It's a really diverse collection. That was really important to us, that all children and young people would see themselves in this collection, and because it has to be for everybody, and I wanted it to be as inclusive as possible. And although I think I was thinking of teens, especially as I was curating it, it is also for adults too. I really hope that adults will find something in it that will bring them joy. There are some poems in there that I have read and reread over lockdown. Anthony Anaxagoras. I speak Greek, so I don't know why I can't say his name. Anaxagoras. Love Will Find You is a poem that I read and reread over lockdown. It's absolutely a poem that speaks to me for several reasons. Mahan's poem, Everything Will Be Okay, I think is one that we've all been coming back to again and again. And Kay Tempest is a poet who has brought me inspiration long before lockdown and continues to do that. So the way that the book is presented, I guess that I'm looking at certain themes, and it's about grief and loss and how that is an inevitable part of life, but that perhaps if we live in the present, if we enjoy life and love and friendship and find gratitude in those things, and have courage, that there is space for hope, that it's important to be ourselves, that we need to love ourselves, and that even though life is uncertain, that hopefully when we open the curtains tomorrow, the sun will be there, the sun will rise, and maybe it will be pink or maybe it will be orange, but that there's reasons to be hopeful. That's it really. I thought that I would end by reading you one of the poems from the book, and it's the title poem called Tomorrow is Beautiful. So I'll read that for you now. Tomorrow is beautiful. Beyond the wall of now, tomorrow is waiting. Its light is desperate to find you. Look for its glow in the corner you had forgotten. Beyond the coal brick of today, tomorrow knows better. It is waffles and blackberries, tea and buttered cake. It is a robin on your windowsill, his puffed red belly striving for song. Beyond the hard silence of here, Tomorrow is beckoning. It is an unexpected love letter. It is a long kiss. It is not crying, not always crying, because tomorrow is beautiful. Tomorrow is beautiful. Bye guys, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Tomorrow is definitely beautiful, and today was wonderful. This evening was a fantastic event. I'm proud to be a part of it. I've had the best time, and I'm loving the fact I might take a leaf out of Sarah's book and grab some nice warm wine and a book and enjoy the rest of the evening. And I want to say thank you to all the great authors we've heard from this evening. Thank you to the Tandem Collective, of course, and Bloomsbury Children's book. But most of all, thank you to you, the readers, the reviewers, and the retailers. We've had a blast this evening. We do have some fantastic news about the giveaway. We have 3 lucky winners. So we've got Nikki Rosengarten, Una Ryan, and we've got Gabby Pulliston-Valdry. You are our winners this evening. Well done to you guys. Thank you very much for entering the competition, to everyone else as well. And thank you for your continued support and happy reading. That is the end of the event. I hope you had a good time. From me to all of you, thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Begin the rubble or our sins. Oh, where do we begin? The rubble or our sins. And the walls kept tumbling down in the city that we love. Great clouds roll over the hills, bringing darkness from us. But if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing changed at all? And if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like you've been here before? Oh, how I'm beginning to be an optimist about this. How I'm beginning to be an optimist about this. If you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing changed at all? Well, how's your view of things today? Got up young to fade away. The sinners sin but aren't aware. Our fables take us everywhere. I can't keep up with you. I can't keep up. I can't compete with history. We'll film it live but dub our tale.